They shared 60 years together, but before she passed, he discovered a shocking secret. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching us from. The year was 1955. In the United States, people were still treated differently because of the color of their skin. There were strict rules that told black people where they could eat, sit, or even walk. A black man and a white woman were not supposed to be together. If they were seen together, it could be very dangerous. The South was especially harsh about these rules, but even the North was not truly safe. Daniel Bryant was a young black man. He was born in a poor town in the South. He had seen his father and other black men struggle all their lives because of unfair rules. His father worked in a factory, and his mother cleaned houses for white families. Daniel started working when he was very young, helping his uncles fix cars. He loved working with engines and learning how they worked. By the time he was 18, he was a mechanic in a small shop. It was one of the few jobs where a black man could make money without having to serve a white boss face to face. Daniel was tall and strong, with dark skin that shined like polished wood. He didn't talk much, but he carried himself with confidence. Some white men didn't like that, and some white women found it interesting. Daniel knew it was dangerous to look at a white woman too long. He had seen what happened to black men who did. Then he met Lillian Whitmore. Lillian was born into a rich white family. She had never been poor. She wore beautiful dresses and fancy shoes. She took lessons on how to be the perfect lady. Her father, Charles Whitmore, was a powerful businessman. He believed that white people were better than everyone else, and he wanted his daughter to marry someone like him. But Lillian didn't want that life. She didn't like all the rules she had to follow. She didn't want to be quiet and obedient. She wanted something different. One summer night, Lillian went to a secret party in a dark basement. The room smelled like smoke and whiskey. Jazz music filled the air, making everything feel exciting and free. At this party, black and white people danced, laughed, and talked, something they could never do in public. That was the night Lillian met Daniel. When she saw him, she didn't look away. She wasn't afraid. She walked toward him without hesitation. Her blonde hair flowed down her shoulders and her blue eyes sparkled with curiosity and excitement. She asked for his name. He wasn't sure if he should answer, but she smiled, and he found himself speaking. They talked for hours. Lillian wanted to know everything about his world. Daniel liked the way she listened, the way she wasn't afraid. It was exciting. It was dangerous. It was something they couldn't stop. When the night ended, Lillian told Daniel she wanted to see him again. He knew he should say no. He knew it wasn't safe, but he didn't walk away. One evening, while Daniel was working late at the auto shop, Lillian came to see him. He was nervous. She wasn't supposed to be there. But before he could tell her to leave, a black car stopped outside. Charles Whitmore stepped out. The moment he saw Daniel and Lillian together, his face twisted with anger. His body shook with rage. Lillian tried to speak, but her father silenced her with a glare colder than ice. Without a word, he grabbed her arm and pulled her away. Daniel didn't move. He knew better than to follow. The next morning, Daniel found a note under the garage door. "Stay away from my daughter." It wasn't a warning. It was a threat. For the first time, Daniel wasn't afraid of men like Charles Whitmore. He was afraid of how much he was willing to risk for Lillian. Lillian was trapped in her house. She wasn't allowed to go outside. Her father watched her closely. He refused to talk to her. Her mother said nothing. Lillian cried, she begged, but no one listened. Still, she found a way. She sent a message through a delivery boy. She whispered to a maid who understood love. She planned a secret meeting in the middle of the night. When she found Daniel again, she told him what he already knew. Her father would never let them be together. But she had made her choice. She chose Daniel. It was a dangerous choice. A white woman running away with a black man was not just shocking, it was against the law. If they were caught, there would be no mercy. But love didn't care about rules. So in the middle of the night, they ran. They ran from her father's power. They ran from a world that would never accept them. They ran toward an unknown future, hoping they could build a life together. But the real danger was only beginning. The night air felt heavy. Lillian's hands shook as she held the small suitcase she had packed in secret. It had only a few things: a dress, some coins, a photograph of her mother. She didn't know why she had brought it. It felt strange how little of her life she could carry. Daniel was waiting for her at the edge of town, near an old train station. He had no suitcase, no pictures. His whole life had always been light enough to carry. When she saw him, she wanted to run into his arms. She wanted him to hold her and tell her it would be okay. But she stayed strong. There was no time for hugs, no time for doubts. They had one chance to escape. A freight train was coming. It was heading north to a factory town in Illinois. In that place, couples like them were rare, but not illegal. It was their best hope. Lillian looked back one last time. She expected to see her father's men chasing after her. She expected them to drag her back home. But the streets were empty. Still, fear filled her heart. Daniel took her hand, his grip strong and steady. "Are you sure?" he asked. Lillian swallowed her fear. Then she nodded. They climbed onto the train, hiding among crates and sacks of grain. No one saw them leave. No one knew where they were going. For the first time in her life, Lillian was free. The journey had been long and difficult. They traveled in the dark, their bodies sore from crouching between big wooden boxes. The train's wheels clanked loudly, shaking Lillian's bones. Every sound reminded her that there was no going back. Daniel hardly spoke. He was always listening, always watching. Every time the train stopped, he became tense. He waited, afraid that men with guns would come, open the doors, and take them away. But no one came. On the second night, they reached Illinois. The town was nothing like the beautiful streets where Lillian grew up. The air smelled like smoke, and the buildings were covered in black dust. The people looked tired from working too much. But here they were just another couple. No one stared at a white woman standing next to a black man. It wasn't kindness, but it wasn't hate either. That was enough. They found a small room to live in. The walls were thin, and they had no privacy. Their bed was tiny, but it was theirs. Daniel got a job in a factory working with hot metal. He worked 12 hours a day in terrible heat. Lillian found a job sewing clothes. Her fingers hurt from working so much. It was hard and nothing like the life she once had, but she never complained, because for the first time she had chosen this life. They got married in a tiny church outside of town. There were no guests, no flowers, and no music. Just them and a preacher who didn't seem happy about it. There was no ring, no celebration, only quiet promises made just for each other. When it was over, Lillian stood outside, looking up at the sky. She was no longer Lillian Whitmore, the rich girl. She was Lillian Bryant, the wife of a black man. The world would never truly accept them, but she felt lighter than ever. Their first year as husband and wife was hard. This town was safer than the South, but people were still unkind. Daniel's co-workers stayed away from him. The women in town looked at Lillian strangely, unsure why she was there. People let them be, but they were never truly welcome. They were always low on money. Some nights they went to bed hungry. Lillian patched up their old clothes until they were more stitches than fabric. Daniel learned to stretch every dollar, buying scraps of food and working extra hours even when his body hurt. But they kept going because love had brought them this far. Still, love could not take away fear. Lillian's father had not forgotten her. He sent letters. The first one ordered her to come home. The second one warned her that she was making a mistake. The third one was a threat. "You will regret this." Lillian burned the letters, but she couldn't burn the fear. She knew her father never gave up. One day he would come looking for her, and she had no idea what he would do. That fear followed her everywhere. She felt it when she walked in the market, when she saw men in fancy suits looking at her too long, when she heard footsteps behind her at night. So, without telling Daniel, she started saving money. At first, just a few coins under the mattress, then a few dollar bills sewn into her dress. She told herself it was just to be safe, but deep down she knew the truth. She had chosen Daniel, but part of her still feared she might have to run away one day. The years passed. Life was never easy, never comfortable, but it was theirs. Daniel worked until he could barely stand, coming home with aching muscles and hands covered in black dust. Lillian sewed clothes until her fingers were rough with blisters. Together, they built a life, little by little. Then their first child was born. Lillian thought she would feel nothing but happiness. She had imagined holding her baby, placing him in Daniel's arms, and feeling their family grow. But when she looked at her tiny baby boy, she felt something else. Guilt. She had another child. A child she had left behind. She had been 17, a different girl in a different world. Her family had hidden her pregnancy. They told everyone she was sick, locked her inside, and made all the decisions for her. When the baby was born, a boy just like this one, she barely got to hold him before he was taken away. Her father made sure there were no records, no trace of him. Lillian had cried for weeks, but then she had learned to bury the pain. She told herself it was for the best. The child would have a good life, far from scandal and shame. Then she met Daniel. She fell in love. She built a new life. And she tried to forget the past. But now, holding her newborn son, the memories came back. She had another son out there, one who had been taken before he even knew her. She never told Daniel. She couldn't. The guilt stayed inside her, quiet but heavy. Their son Matthew grew fast. His skin was a mix of his parents' colors. His eyes were sharp like his father's, his smile soft like his mother's. He was the first thing they had truly built together, a living, breathing proof of their love. And yet, Lillian couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Lillian had a secret, one she never spoke about. A long time ago, before she had her children, she had a baby. But she could not keep him, so she gave him away. Sometimes, in her dreams, she saw the child. She wondered if he looked like Matthew, her son, if he had her nose, or if he had Daniel's calm and kind eyes. She wondered if he ever thought about the mother he had never met. Lillian never talked about it. Instead, she pushed the secret deep inside her heart and focused on her family, on Matthew, on Daniel, and on their life together. But the past does not always stay buried. As the years went by, they had another child, Beatrice. Beatrice was different from Matthew. She was loud and full of energy, never afraid of anything. Her laughter filled their small home. She was not quiet like her father or gentle like her mother. She was a little storm, wild and bright. Lillian loved her dearly. But with every passing year, the secret in her heart felt heavier. She often thought about the boy she had given away. By now, he would be a young man. Was he happy? Did he live in a home like theirs? Did he ever wonder where he came from? Lillian prayed that he had a good life, that he never felt alone. Most of all, she prayed that Daniel would never find out. But secrets are heavy things. They can make the heart tired. They can make a person feel far away, even when they are right next to the ones they love. Daniel noticed that Lillian had changed. She became quieter, lost in her thoughts. At first, he thought she was just tired. After all, being a parent was not easy, and their life was hard. But then he saw it, the way she looked into the distance as if searching for something far away, the way she hesitated when people talked about the past, the way she flinched when she heard the word adoption. Daniel was a man who respected silence. He understood that some wounds were too painful to talk about. But this was different. This was his wife, and she was slipping away from him. One night, when their children were fast asleep, Daniel found Lillian sitting alone at the kitchen table. She was holding a torn piece of fabric in her lap. She didn't notice him at first, and for the first time, Daniel felt scared. There was a distance between them, something she was keeping from him. And for the first time, he wondered if he really knew his wife at all. Lillian had always known that marriage was not like the fairy tales in books and movies. She knew, even as a little girl, that love and survival were two different things. Daniel was a good husband. He was kind, patient, and worked hard to take care of their family. He never complained, even after long, tiring days at the steel mill. And Lillian loved him. She truly did. But there was something she had never told him. She had not married him because she loved him at first. She had married him because she was afraid. Lillian had grown up in a rich family where fathers chose who their daughters would marry. Her father introduced her to rich men, the sons of bankers, lawyers, and businessmen. He picked them like one might pick the best horse for a race. Lillian had done what was expected. She smiled, she danced, she let them take her hand. She had followed the rules until she met Daniel. Daniel was different. He did not belong in her world. But he made her question everything she had been taught. So she ran to him, not because she loved him, but because she was afraid of the life waiting for her if she did not escape. The thought made her stomach twist. Because now, after all these years, she did love Daniel. She loved the way he kissed her forehead before work. She loved the way he held their children, rocking them to sleep with a voice as deep as the earth. She loved the way he never raised his voice, even when he was upset. She loved how safe she felt with him. And yet, she had never told him the truth. That when she married him, it was not for love, it was for survival. She told herself it did not matter. Love had come in time, but then came the whispers, not from Daniel, but from the world around them. Women in the market still gave her strange looks, as if she had made a mistake. Men sneered when Daniel walked past them. And worst of all, their children had questions. Mama, why do people look at Daddy like he doesn't belong? Mama, why do the kids say I'm different? Mama, why doesn't Grandpa ever visit us? Lillian had no answers. She had spent so long running from her past that she had never stopped to think about what it meant for her children to live between two different worlds. And worst of all, she had never told Daniel that in the hardest moments, when she was tired, scared, and overwhelmed, she had thought about leaving. She had looked at the little money she had saved and wondered if it was enough to take the children and disappear. She never planned to do it, but the fact that she had even thought about it haunted her. Daniel was no fool. He saw how Lillian avoided certain questions. He noticed how she hesitated when he asked about her past. He saw the way she grew quiet when their children spoke about being different. And he wondered, did she love him because he was her choice? Or did she love him because he had been her only escape? He was afraid to ask, because he wasn't sure he wanted to hear the answer. Lillian told herself the past was behind her. She had a home, a family, a life that, while simple, was full of love. Outside their home, the world still looked at them strangely. But inside, they had something close to peace. But peace is a fragile thing. The first letter came on an ordinary afternoon. Someone had slipped it under the door while Lillian was out shopping. A thin white envelope rested on the wooden floor. It was like a ghost from another life, one she had tried so hard to forget. She looked at the letter for a long time before picking it up. There was no return address, just her name. She knew the handwriting right away. It was her father's. Her stomach felt tight as she opened it. The words inside were short and cold. You do not understand what you have done. She felt sick. It had been years since she last heard from him. After she ran away, he sent letters telling her to come home. Then he sent letters threatening her. Then, nothing. She thought he had given up, but she was wrong. For weeks, she waited for another letter, but none came. She tried not to think about it, but it felt like a heavy stone inside her chest. What did he mean? Was he just trying to scare her again, or was it something worse? She told herself not to worry. Then she saw the man. It was early evening. She had taken the children to the market. They ran and played while she bought potatoes and fresh milk. Then she saw him, a white man in a suit. He stood at the corner of the street. He wasn't buying anything. He wasn't talking to anyone. He was watching her. A chill ran through her body. She told herself it was just her imagination, but that the next day she saw him again, and the day after that, always at a distance, always watching. She didn't tell Daniel. She knew what he would say. "You are just imagining things. Don't worry." Or worse, he would say, "If it is your father, we need to face him." But she didn't want to face him. She wanted him to stay in the past where he belonged. Then the second letter came. This one was different. It was not from her father. It was from someone else, someone she never thought she would hear from again. "I know who you are." Her heart stopped. She read the letter again. The handwriting was new to her. The message was short, but she knew what it meant. Someone had found out about her secret, the child she had long ago abandoned. She had buried that secret so deep, she almost forgot it. Now someone knew. She felt her world crack. She didn't sleep. She didn't eat. Daniel noticed. He asked what was wrong. She said nothing, but he knew better. One day he found the letter. It was hidden at the bottom of her dresser. He read it, and she saw the change in his eyes. He realized something. There were things about his wife he had never known. Maybe after all these years, he didn't know her at all. Lillian always knew her past would catch up to her. She spent years trying to believe her old life was gone. She told herself she was no longer Charles Whitmore's rich daughter, no longer the girl too afraid to fight for her child, no longer the young bride who ran to Daniel, not for love, but to escape. But she was wrong. That girl was still inside her, hiding in the corners of her mind. Then she got sick. At first it was small, a little cough, a little dizziness. She didn't think it was serious. But then the pain started, a deep, sharp pain in her chest. It stole her breath. It made moving difficult. Daniel saw it first. He saw her struggle to lift a pot from the stove. He saw how she winced when she thought no one was looking. At first, he said nothing, but one night she collapsed on the floor while folding laundry. That was when he knew. They couldn't ignore it anymore. The doctor came the next morning. He was a white man, middle-aged. His face gave away nothing as he pressed his fingers to her wrist, listening to her heartbeat. He asked her questions. He nodded at her answers, but he frowned when she stayed silent. Then he spoke. His voice was calm, too calm. She had heard that kind of voice before, the kind that tried to be kind but really only brought bad news. She was dying. "It's your heart," he said. "It's getting weaker. There is nothing we can do." Daniel stood still. His hands were clenched into fists. Lillian closed her eyes. She thought she would feel scared. But she didn't. She just felt tired. She had been running for so long. Maybe it was time to stop. But Daniel would not accept it. He searched for another doctor, another answer, another hope. But every doctor said the same thing. Her time was running out, and she knew before she left this world she had to tell the truth. She had kept too many secrets. It was time to set them free. One evening, as the sun set behind the rooftops, she asked Daniel to sit with her. He hesitated. Her voice sounded different. It sounded final. He was afraid, not just of her dying, but of what she was about to say. She told him everything. She told him about the money she had hidden in case she ever needed to run. She told him how in the early years she didn't trust him. She didn't trust their life together. She told him she had been afraid she might need to escape. She told him about her first child, the child she had abandoned. She told him about her father, how even in death he had haunted her, how she had never been free of him. Then she told him the worst truth of all. She had not married him for love. She had married him because she had been scared. He had been her escape, not her choice. Daniel sat in silence. She couldn't read his face. Was he angry? Was he sad? Or did he feel nothing at all? Tears fell down her cheeks. The guilt in her heart was heavy. Then she told him the one thing she knew was true. Despite everything, despite the lies, despite the secrets, despite the mistakes, she had come to love him. Truly, deeply, more than she ever thought she could. She loved him and she hoped that would be enough. After that, the days felt blurry. Daniel did not say much, but he took care of her. He held her when she was in pain. He wiped her forehead when she had a fever. He carried her to bed when she was too weak to walk. But he never told her how he felt. She never asked. She did not need to know, because in the end, it did not matter. He was still there, and for her, that was enough. One night, the air in the house was cold. Her body felt heavy. She could barely move. Then she felt Daniel's arms around her. He whispered something very softly. She could hardly hear it. But as she closed her eyes for the last time, she smiled, because she knew in that moment he had forgiven her. Or maybe he had not. Maybe it did not matter. Maybe love was not about being perfect. Maybe love was about staying, even when it hurt, even when the past could not be changed, even when goodbye was the only thing left to say. The house was too quiet. It was the kind of quiet that felt heavy, like it was inside the walls, inside the air, inside everything. Lillian was gone. Daniel sat in their bedroom, staring at the empty space beside him. Her pillow was still there. It still had the faint shape of her head. For days, he did not move it. He left it the way it was, hoping he could pretend she was still there. But the truth was clear. She was gone, and she had left him with secrets. Her confession had broken something inside him, not because she had lied, but because he had never even thought she could. They had spent so many years together. He had trusted her. He believed their love was real, that it was built on trust, not just because she needed him, but now he did not know what to believe. Had their life been a lie? Had she really loved him, or had he only been a way for her to escape a life she did not want? Daniel had always fought to be seen as a strong man. The world had always told him he was not enough. And now, even in his own home, even with the woman he loved, he wondered if he had ever really belonged. The letters were still there, the ones from her father. They were old and yellow. She had hidden them in a drawer, the threats, the warnings, and then the last letter, the one that had broken her in the end. I know who you are. The handwriting was different. The fear was different. She had never told him what it meant, but now he needed to know. His hands shook as he opened the drawer. He picked up the old letters and unfolded them one by one. The last letter was short, just one sentence. Your son is looking for you. Daniel froze. The room spun. He read the words again. His breath caught in his throat. Their son, not Matthew, not Beatrice, a different son. The one she had given away, the one he never even knew existed. His hands tightened around the paper. There had been another child, another piece of Lillian, a secret she never told him, a son who had been out there searching for answers, and now she was gone. And all that was left were questions with no answers. Daniel sat there staring at the letter. He did not just grieve for Lillian. He grieved for the life he thought was real, a life he now realized was full of ghosts. The house felt different without her. It was not just empty. It was not just quiet. It was something deeper, a feeling of things left unsaid. For years, Daniel believed he knew his wife. He thought their love was strong, unshakable. But now, after her death, that belief was slipping away. He sat at the kitchen table. The letter was in front of him. Your son is looking for you. The words felt like a wound that would never heal. Lillian had carried this secret for years. She had let it stay inside her, growing like a shadow. And she never told him. Daniel clenched his fists. How could she? How could she sit with him every night at dinner and never say a word? How could she watch their children grow and never speak this son's name? Had she planned to take this secret to the grave? She had confessed so much before she died. The money, the doubts, the fact that she had not married him for love, at least not in the beginning. But this she had kept hidden. Now Daniel was left alone with the truth. Matthew and Beatrice did not understand. They were grieving too, but their pain was different. To them, Lillian was a mother, loving, caring, always there. To Daniel, she was more. She was his partner, his home, the woman he had fought for, the woman he trusted more than anyone else. Now he did not know what was real anymore. What had been love? What had been a lie? Days passed. Daniel worked because it was the only thing that made sense. The steel mill did not care about grief. It did not care that his world had changed. It only wanted his strength, his time. That at least was simple, but nothing else was. Not when he walked through the market and felt people staring. Not when he lay in bed and reached for Lillian, only to find nothing but cold sheets. Not when he saw the letter again, waiting for him, reminding him of the truth he was afraid to face. One evening, after the children were asleep, he sat at the table and unfolded the letter again. No name, no address, just a fact. A son was out there looking for him. Daniel wrestled with the thought. What good would it do to find this boy now? What did he owe to someone who had never been part of their lives? But then another thought came. What if it had been Matthew? What if someone had taken his son away from him? Wouldn't he want to know? Wouldn't he deserve to? And so one morning, before the sun had fully risen, Daniel left the house. He walked to the post office, holding the letter tightly in his hand. And for the first time since Lillian's death, he made a decision. He would find this boy. He would give him the truth that had been stolen from him, even if it hurt, even if it changed everything. Because the past had already taken too much, and Daniel was not going to let it take anything more. Thanks for watching. If you liked the story, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Check out our other videos too. See you in the next one.